Chapter 5. The Confrontation. The park was eerily quiet, the fading light casting long shadows across the manicured lawn. Elena sat on a bench beneath an old oak tree, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Clara sat beside her, visibly tense, her eyes darting to every sound and movement around them. Detective Harris and his team were stationed discreetly nearby, their unmarked car parked a short distance away. Elena could feel the weight of their watchful eyes, but it did little to ease her anxiety. "He'll come," Harris had assured her earlier. "Men like Victor can't resist the chance to assert control. He's been playing cat and mouse with you, and this is his chance to feel like he's won." Elena wasn't so sure. Victor was cunning, unpredictable. She couldn't shake the fear that something would go horribly wrong. As the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, Clara stiffened beside her. "Elena," she whispered, her voice trembling. Elena followed Clara's gaze and saw him. Victor stood at the edge of the clearing, his tall frame silhouetted against the dim light. He wore a dark coat, his hands buried in the pockets, and his expression was unreadable. Elena's heart pounded as Victor began walking toward them, his steps slow and deliberate. "Clara," Elena said softly, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "Stay calm. Harris is here." Clara nodded, though her hand gripped the bench so tightly her knuckles turned white. Victor stopped a few feet away, his piercing gaze fixed on Elena. "Bold of you to meet me like this," he said, his tone calm but dripping with malice. "What's the plan, Elena? A heartfelt plea for me to leave you alone?" Elena stood, her chin held high. "No, Victor. This ends tonight." Victor's lips curled into a smirk. "Oh, it ends, all right, but not the way you think." Elena glanced subtly toward the unmarked car, but Victor caught the movement. His smirk widened. "Police?" he guessed, his tone mocking. "How predictable." He took a step closer, his voice lowering. "You think they can stop me? You don't know what I'm capable of." "You're right," Elena said, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "I don't know everything, but I know one thing. You're a coward. You prey on people you think are weaker than you, and you manipulate them to make yourself feel powerful. But I'm not afraid of you anymore." Victor's expression darkened, his smirk fading. "You should be," he said coldly. As Victor reached into his coat pocket, Harris and his team sprang into action. The sound of footsteps rushing toward them filled the air, and Victor froze, his eyes narrowing as two plainclothes officers approached from either side. "Victor Blackwell," Harris called out, his voice commanding. "Hands where we can see them." Victor's eyes flicked between Harris and Elena, a mix of rage and calculation flashing across his face. For a moment, Elena thought he might comply. But then, with startling speed, he pulled a knife from his pocket and lunged toward her. Clara screamed as Elena stumbled backward, narrowly avoiding the blade. Harris and the officers closed in, tackling Victor to the ground before he could make another move. The struggle was brief but intense. Victor thrashed and cursed, but the officers overpowered him, securing his hands behind his back. "It's over, Blackwell," Harris said firmly as Victor glared up at him, his face twisted with fury. Victor was taken into custody, his threats finally silenced. As the police car disappeared into the distance, Clara collapsed onto the bench, her body shaking with sobs. Elena sat beside her, pulling her into a tight embrace. "It's over," she whispered, her voice breaking. "He can't hurt us anymore." Clara nodded, though her tears continued to fall. "I was so scared," she admitted. "I thought he was going to—" "But he didn't," Elena said firmly, "and he never will." Harris approached them, his expression weary but satisfied. "You both did well," he said. "This wasn't easy, but you stood your ground. That takes courage." Elena managed a faint smile. "What happens now?" "We've got enough evidence to keep him locked up for a long time," Harris assured her. "And with his history, I doubt the court will be lenient." As the sisters left the park, the weight of the past weeks began to lift. Victor's shadow no longer loomed over them, and for the first time in years they felt the stirrings of hope. But deep down, Elena knew this was only the beginning. Healing would take time, and the scars Victor had left, both physical and emotional, would not fade easily. Still, they had each other, and together they would rebuild the lives he had tried to destroy. Chapter 6: The Turning Point. The days following Victor's arrest were a blur of police interviews, court preparations, and restless nights. Though he was behind bars awaiting trial, his presence lingered like a ghost. Elena found herself double-checking locks, jumping at shadows, and bracing for every unexpected noise. Clara, too, struggled, her nightmares often pulling her from sleep in the middle of the night. Elena knew they couldn't live like this. Victor might be physically gone, but the fear he instilled had taken root. Something had to change, and that change had to come from within. One afternoon, Elena met with Detective Harris at the station. He handed her a folder filled with Victor's background information. Inside were police reports, psychiatric evaluations, and a detailed history of his manipulation and violence. "This might help you understand him," Harris said. "Sometimes knowing the full story can help you take back control." Elena hesitated, but eventually opened the folder. The contents were disturbing. Stories of a volatile childhood, his father's obsession with revenge, and Victor's slow descent into darkness. But one detail stood out. Among the documents was a handwritten letter from Victor's mother, dated years before his marriage to Clara. It was addressed to Mark, Elena and Clara's father. "Mark, what Joseph did to you was wrong, but what you did to us was worse. I hope one day you realize the damage you caused, not just to my husband, but to our son." That evening, Elena shared the letter with Clara. At first, Clara refused to look at it. "I don't want to know any more about him," she said, her voice shaking. "You need to," Elena pressed gently. "This isn't just about Victor. This is about us, about understanding how we got here and how we move forward." Clara finally relented. As she read the letter, her expression shifted from fear to sadness. "He's been carrying this pain his whole life," she murmured. "It doesn't excuse what he did, but I can see why he became who he is." Elena nodded. "Understanding him doesn't mean forgiving him, but it does mean we don't let him define us anymore." Determined to find closure, the sisters decided to visit their father's old workplace. The building was now abandoned, a crumbling relic of a once thriving business. As they walked through the empty halls, memories of their childhood came rushing back. They remembered playing in their father's office, oblivious to the secrets he kept and the damage he had caused. Clara stopped in front of a rusted filing cabinet, her fingers brushing against its surface. "Do you think he ever regretted what he did?" she asked softly. Elena sighed. "I don't know, but I do know this. We're not him. We don't have to carry his mistakes." Clara nodded, her shoulders straightening. "You're right. We deserve to move on." Back at home, Elena and Clara began to take small steps toward reclaiming their lives. They started therapy sessions, separately and together, to confront the trauma they had endured. Clara found solace in painting, using art to process her emotions, while Elena channeled her energy into self-defense classes. As weeks turned into months, they grew stronger. The shadows Victor had cast began to fade, replaced by a newfound sense of resilience and hope. One evening, as they sat on the balcony watching the sunset, Clara turned to Elena. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" Elena asked. "For saving me. For not giving up, even when I wanted to." Elena smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "We saved each other, Clara, and we'll keep saving each other, no matter what." The weight of the past finally beginning to lift. For the first time in years, they felt free, not just from Victor, but from the legacy of pain that had haunted their family for so long. Chapter 7. Closure. The courtroom was cold and sterile, the hum of whispered conversations filling the air as people took their seats. Elena sat in the front row beside Clara, their hands clasped tightly together. Today was the day Victor would face justice, a moment that had seemed impossible just months ago. Victor sat at the defendant's table, his once commanding presence diminished. He avoided their gaze, his expression unreadable as the judge entered the room. Detective Harris had assured them that the evidence was overwhelming. The threatening texts, the vandalism, the physical attack at the park. Coupled with his history of abuse and manipulation, Victor's conviction was all but guaranteed. As the trial began, Elena felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. She had dreaded this moment, but now, sitting here with Clara by her side, she realized something important. They had already won. Victor no longer held power over them. The prosecution's case was strong, laying out Victor's calculated pattern of control and violence. When it was Clara's turn to testify, she walked to the stand with her head held high. "Victor manipulated me into believing I was powerless," she said, her voice steady. "He isolated me, made me question my worth, and tried to destroy everything I cared about. But he underestimated me and my sister. We're not powerless. Not anymore." Elena watched with pride as Clara returned to her seat, her strength undeniable. When Victor chose to testify, his demeanor was a mix of arrogance and defiance. He tried to paint himself as the victim, blaming his actions on his troubled childhood and the pain caused by their father. But the jury saw through his facade. After hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their decision. The foreperson stood, her voice clear and steady. We find the defendant, Victor Blackwell, guilty on all charges. A wave of relief swept over Elena and Clara as the words sank in. Victor would face years behind bars, unable to harm them or anyone else again. Victor was led away in handcuffs, his gaze briefly meeting Elena's. She saw the anger there, the hatred, but also something else: defeat. For the first time, she felt no fear. In the months that followed, life slowly began to return to normal. Elena and Clara worked to rebuild what Victor had tried to destroy, not just their physical lives, but their sense of safety and identity. Elena found a new job, one that allowed her to channel her energy into helping other survivors of abuse. Clara's artwork gained recognition, her paintings of resilience and healing resonating with others who had faced similar struggles. One sunny afternoon, they returned to their mother's house, sitting down with her to have an honest conversation about their family's past. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Together, they began to untangle the web of secrets and pain that had haunted them for so long. On the anniversary of Victor's arrest, Elena and Clara visited the park where the confrontation had taken place. Standing beneath the old oak tree, they reflected on how far they had come. "We're not the same people we were back then," Clara said, a soft smile on her face. "No, we're not," Elena agreed. "And that's a good thing." They hugged, their bonds stronger than ever. As they walked away, the sun broke through the clouds, casting warm light over the path ahead. For the first time in years, the future felt bright, full of possibility and hope. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey through Elena and Clara's story. We've seen their struggles, their strength, and ultimately their triumph over the darkness that tried to consume them. If you enjoyed this tale of resilience and justice, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. And for more captivating stories and updates, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a new chapter. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of the ending? What's your favorite part of the story? Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Until then, take care and stay strong.